$4.3 billion. That is what the world spent on Jamaica in a single year. Not the Caribbean, not the region, Jamaica, one island. 10,990 square kilometers, roughly the size of the state of Connecticut. And the world came there and left $4.3 billion behind in 2024 alone, 4.3 million visitors, a national record. And before the island had finished marking the achievement, the target for the following year was already higher. The question that rarely gets a serious answer is this: who are these people? Where are they coming from? And why do they keep returning? When you examine the actual data, the verified arrival figures from the Jamaica Tourist Board, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and the Bank of Jamaica, a picture emerges that is more complicated, more economically significant, and more directly relevant to every Jamaican in the diaspora than the summary figures in an annual press release suggest. This is not a travel video. It is an economic account, a diaspora account. It is the story of how an island of 3 million people built one of the most globally recognized tourism brands on earth, and which countries, deliberately or otherwise, chose to send their money, their people, and their attention to it. 10 countries made this list. The one at number 1 carries a relationship with Jamaica that no arrival statistic alone can fully explain. Number 10. Latin America and the Caribbean. For most of Jamaica's modern tourism history, the operating model has been consistent. Attract visitors from North America and the United Kingdom, house them in North Coast resorts, and manage the experience from there. The marketing strategy, the airline partnerships, the hotel development pipeline, all of it was structured around that narrow band of source markets. What the Caribbean Tourism Organization 2024 Performance Review captured is a measurable shift away from that pattern. South America became the fastest-growing source market for the entire Caribbean region in 2024. Arrivals from the continent rose 17.8% in a single year, nearly 20% above the pre-pandemic figures from 2019. The growth was driven primarily by Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia. Intra-Caribbean travel, Caribbean residents traveling within their own region, reached 1.6 million trips in 2024, a 5.1% increase over 2023. Jamaica is not the sole beneficiary of that expansion. Other Caribbean destinations have captured Latin American and regional visitors as well, but the directional signal is clear. The assumption that Jamaica's visitor base is almost entirely English-speaking and North Atlantic is being tested by the data. The practical significance for diaspora communities in North America and the United Kingdom is this: the narrative that Jamaica's economy depends entirely on American antlers and British tourists has been broadly accurate for decades. It is becoming less so. Brazil and Colombia are sending more travelers to the Caribbean than they did before the pandemic. These are not diaspora visitors with ancestral ties to the island. They are first-time markets, and Jamaica's tourism authorities are registering the shift. The Jamaica Tourist Board does not yet maintain a dedicated regional office for Latin America in the way it does for North America and Europe. But the Caribbean Tourism Organization's data points toward a growth frontier that Jamaica would be well positioned to pursue if it chose to. The current growth in South American outbound travel suggests the window for early engagement is open. Number 10 is a directional indicator. The volume is modest. The trajectory is worth noting. Number 9, India. India does not currently appear in Jamaica's published rankings of top source markets. The publicly available arrival data does not yet support placing India above established markets on a visitor count basis. That clarification is important because what follows is not based on current arrivals, but on a sustained and documented strategic commitment. For 3 consecutive years, 2024, 2025, and 2026, the Jamaica Tourist Board has participated in SAT, South Asia's principal travel and tourism trade event. The 2024 appearance was the JTB's first in the organization's history. By 2026, it was their 3rd consecutive year at the event. The JTB brought Indian travel agents to Jamaica for its own industry product exchange, established a representative office in New Delhi, and Donovan White, Jamaica's Director of Tourism, stated directly at SATI 2024. India is an emerging market that Jamaica intends to leverage to increase our arrivals and earnings. It represents huge possibilities for cultural exchange. Minister of Tourism Edmund Bartlett outlined the strategic rationale in specific terms. He identified 3 structural points of connection. First, destination wedding tourism, a market in which India has a substantial and growing outbound segment, and one where Jamaica holds multiple World Travel Awards accolades. Second, cricket. Jamaica hosts international test and one-day international cricket, and the shared cultural attachment to the sport provides a point of engagement between the two countries that most tourism marketing frameworks would not identify. Third, the Indian diaspora communities residing in Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom, which already travel internationally and which, in several cities, share geographic and commercial space with Jamaican diaspora communities. The structural case for India rests on scale. India's outbound tourism market is among the fastest growing in the world. A small fraction of that market choosing Jamaica as a destination would produce visitor numbers that are meaningful by any regional standard. The primary constraint at present is air connectivity. Without direct or reasonably convenient routing between Indian gateway cities and Montego Bay, growth will be gradual. What is notable is that Jamaica is investing in the relationship before the infrastructure exists to sustain mass arrivals. The logic is straightforward. Securing market positioning before competition for that market intensifies is more effective and less expensive than entering after others have established themselves. Number 9 is India, not yet a confirmed top 10 source response market by arrivals, documented as a strategic priority by Jamaica's tourism leadership for 3 consecutive years. Number 8. The Caribbean region and intra-regional travel. This entry does not appear in any formal JTB source market ranking, and the reason is largely methodological. Much of the travel that constitutes this segment is not captured comprehensively by standard tourism metrics. Visitors who stay with family rather than in hotels, or who travel through informal channels, do not register in the hotel occupancy data or arrival surveys that shape official reporting. Jamaica maintains diaspora connections throughout the wider Caribbean and Central America, in the Cayman Islands, in Panama, in Cuba, in Costa Rica. These communities maintain active travel links to the island. The frequency and volume of that movement exceeds what the published figures reflect. Beyond the diaspora connection, Jamaica occupies a specific cultural position within the Caribbean that influences travel behavior across the region. For a professional from Georgetown, a family from Port of Spain, or a visitor from Bridgetown, Jamaica represents something distinct from other Caribbean destinations. It is the country most consistently associated with the region's global cultural identity, the birthplace of reggae, the home of Bob Marley, the island that produced Usain Bolt, Reggae Sumfest in Montego Bay in July, Reggae Month in February, and international cricket at Sabina Park in Kingston draw regional visitors who are traveling specifically for cultural and sporting events, not for beach tourism in the conventional sense. The Caribbean Tourism Organization recorded 1.6 million intra-regional trips across the Caribbean in 2024. Jamaica's share of that figure is not broken out separately in the publicly available data. Given the island's cultural centrality to the region, it is reasonable to infer that Jamaica captures a disproportionate portion relative to its population size. That inference is not confirmed by a specific source and should be treated as contextual rather than statistical. Number 8 is the Caribbean region, limited in raw volume among Jamaica's source markets, but representing a category of travel with cultural dimensions that the standard tourism framework underweights. Number 7. Germany and continental Europe. Specific arrival figures for Germany to Jamaica are not available in the publicly accessible data reviewed for this report. The Jamaica Tourist Board does not publish a standalone Germany figure in its press releases, and the premium datasets that would contain that breakdown were not available for verification. What can be confirmed is the following. The JTB maintains representative offices in Berlin, Barcelona, Rome, Amsterdam, and Paris. 5 European cities across 5 countries: Germany, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, and France. Representative offices are opened and maintained in markets where visitor volume justifies the cost of operation. The distribution of those offices reflects where European demand for Jamaica is concentrated. European arrivals to the Caribbean broadly reached 5.3 million in 2024, representing 89.4% of 2019 pre-pandemic levels. The Caribbean Tourism Organization recorded a 1.4% year-over-year increase in European arrivals to the region in 2024. The recovery has been slower than the North American market, but the absolute numbers remain substantial. Germany is relevant to the Jamaica tourism story for a reason that the standard arrivals framework does not capture: the depth of reggae music's cultural penetration in German society. Reggae in Germany is not a niche interest. It operates at a mainstream level with established German artists, German record labels that have distributed Jamaican music for decades, and major festival events that draw large audiences in Hamburg and other cities. This is a country where the cultural connection to Jamaica is not mediated by diaspora ties or colonial history. It is built almost entirely through music. That is an unusual and durable form of affinity. European visitors to Jamaica as a group tend to spend more time on the island per visit than North American visitors and are more likely to travel beyond the Montego Bay Resort Corridor. They represent a higher yield segment in terms of engagement with the wider Jamaican economy, even if their total numbers are smaller than the North American market. Number 7 is Germany and Continental Europe, a confirmed segment through JTB office presence and Caribbean Tourism Organization data, without a verified standalone arrival figure for Germany specifically. Number 6. The Jamaican diaspora as a unified economic force. The Jamaica Tourist Board does not formally track diaspora return visits as a separate category in its published tourism statistics. Despite that, the Jamaican diaspora represents one of the most consequential relationships the island has with the countries on this list, and understanding it requires looking at two separate data streams simultaneously: tourism arrivals and remittance flows. By 2024, Jamaica's emigrant stock, people born in Jamaica living abroad, was estimated at approximately 1.248 million. That figure covers only the first generation. The broader diaspora, including second and third generation descendants who hold foreign passports but maintain Jamaican cultural identity, is estimated at approximately 3 million people worldwide. That is roughly equivalent to the current resident population of Jamaica itself. The geographic distribution of that diaspora maps almost exactly onto Jamaica's top 3 tourism source markets. The United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada account for the overwhelming majority of the diaspora's total population. The correspondence between where Jamaicans live abroad and where Jamaica's tourists originate is not coincidental. It reflects the pull that diaspora communities exert on travel patterns within their host countries, both through direct return visits and through the social networks they maintain with non-Jamaican residents. Diaspora travel is consistently undercounted in standard tourism reporting. Visitors who stay in family homes rather than hotels do not appear in accommodation occupancy figures. Those who travel during school holidays or family events rather than during the tourism high season do not necessarily register in the peak period arrival data. The gap between the official stopover count and the actual number of Jamaican-connected individuals entering the island each year is likely significant. The remittance data provides a more complete picture of the diaspora's economic relationship with Jamaica. In 2024, remittances to the island reached approximately $3.6 billion, representing close to 19% of Jamaica's gross domestic product. 90% of those inflows originated from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. The Bank of Jamaica's own surveys found that approximately 85% of remittances are directed toward utility payments and basic household expenses, not investment or discretionary spending. This is money that sustains daily life for a significant portion of Jamaican households. In 2025, remittance inflows reached $3.49 billion, according to Bank of Jamaica data, surpassing the $3.36 billion recorded in 2024 even after Hurricane Melissa disrupted economic activity across western Jamaica in October of that year. Monthly data showed that net inflows declined in October and November following the storm, then recovered sharply in December, recording a 13.6% increase compared to December 2024. The scale of that December recovery reflected the diaspora's response to the humanitarian and economic disruption caused by the hurricane. Remittances and tourism revenue operate as parallel economic pipelines feeding into Jamaica from the same 3 countries. Together, they represent the primary mechanism through which the island sustains its foreign exchange position, funds household consumption, and finances public services. The diaspora is, in economic terms, as significant to Jamaica as its entire hotel and resort sector. Number 6 is the Jamaican diaspora, not a country, not a single source market. a distributed economic actor concentrated in 3 countries, whose financial and cultural relationship with Jamaica is more consequential than most of the individual entries on this list. Number 5. Canada. Canada holds a consistent and structurally significant position in Jamaica's tourism economy that its relatively modest media profile does not fully reflect. It ranks second only to the United States as a source market for stopover visitors, and its contribution to Jamaica's tourism revenue has been sustained across multiple decades without the volatility that periodically affects the American and European markets. Canadian arrivals to the Caribbean broadly reached 3.3 million in 2024, a 4% increase year over year. The recovery pace from Canadian markets outpaced the European segment, though Canadian arrivals remain slightly below their 2019 pre-pandemic levels in absolute terms. Within the Canadian market, Jamaica's appeal has been anchored, in part, by the strong historical preference among Canadian travelers for all-inclusive resort products in the Caribbean, a category in which Jamaica has some of the highest capacity and most established offerings in the region. The Jamaica Tourist Board operates a full regional office in Toronto, not a representative office, but a fully staffed operational presence. The JTB maintains full offices in only 4 international cities: Miami, Toronto, London, and the domestic offices in Kingston and Montego Bay. The placement of Toronto in that tier of operational priority reflects the sustained commercial importance of the Canadian market to Jamaica's tourism planning. The 2021 Canadian census recorded 249,070 people of Jamaican ancestry, distributed across first, second, and third generations. The largest concentration is in the Greater Toronto area, with significant communities in Brampton, Mississauga, and Scarborough. The social networks that exist between the Jamaican Canadian community and the broader Canadian population function as an informal distribution channel for Jamaica as a destination, create awareness among non-Jamaican Canadians through personal relationships rather than formal advertising. Longer-stay winter visitors from Canada represent a segment of the Canadian market that does not register proportionally in the annual arrival counts. Travelers who spend 6 to 12 weeks on the island during the Canadian winter, renting villas or apartments, purchasing groceries and services locally, engaging with the economy outside of the resort environment, contribute to Jamaica's economy in ways that per-head arrival statistics do not fully capture. The Canadian relationship with Jamaica is also reinforced by the remittance corridor. Canada is one of the 3 primary source countries for the 90% share of remittances that originates in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada combined. The financial and the tourism relationships between the 2 countries are not separate phenomena. They are expressions of the same underlying diaspora connection. Number 5 is Canada, consistent, structurally embedded, and underrepresented in the public narrative about Jamaica's global relationships. Number 4. The United States, the scale argument. The United States accounts for approximately 74% of all stopover visitors to Jamaica. Combined with Canada and the United Kingdom, these 3 countries produce approximately 94% of all stopover arrivals. The concentration of Jamaica's visitor base in those 3 markets is the most consequential structural fact in the island's tourism economy, and the United States is the dominant element within that concentration. In 2023, American arrivals to Jamaica increased by 16.2% compared to 2022. The growth was distributed across all 4 major United States regions. The Midwest recorded the largest proportional increase at 23.3%, followed by the West at 16.8%, the South at 15%, and the Northeast at 14.5%. The breadth of that distribution, growth not concentrated in diaspora-heavy coastal cities but spread across inland regions where Jamaican communities are smaller, indicates that Jamaica's brand had reached beyond its diaspora audience into the mainstream American travel market. In 2023, New York State produced more than 350,000 visitors to Jamaica, the largest contribution from any single American state. Florida followed with 326,633. Those 2 states together accounted for nearly 700,000 visitors, a figure that exceeds the total annual arrivals to Jamaica from the United Kingdom by a factor of approximately 3. The United States Jamaican community, estimated at 1.124 million people by American Community Survey data, with the largest concentrations in the New York metropolitan area and Florida, generates travel to Jamaica through multiple mechanisms. Direct diaspora return visits account for a portion. Travel by non-Jamaican Americans introduced to the island through social and professional connections within Jamaican American communities accounts for another. The accumulation of those referral chains over time has created a situation where Jamaica's market presence in American cities like Atlanta, Houston, and Orlando extends beyond the boundaries of its immediate diaspora community. The investment being made in Jamaica by American-linked hospitality brands reflects the commercial confidence that exists in the sustained American demand for the destination. Airlines have added seats, a 12.9% increase in air capacity in early 2025, compared to the same period the previous year, primarily through routes serving American hubs. The 5x5x5 growth strategy, which targets 5 million visitors and $5 billion in annual earnings by the end of 2025, was modeled on the assumption of continued growth in American arrivals. The concentration of 74% of stopover arrivals in a single-source market is simultaneously Jamaica's greatest commercial advantage and its primary structural vulnerability. When the American economy contracts, Jamaica's tourism revenues contract with it. When American carriers reduce capacity, arrivals fall. The dependency is not incidental. It is built into the current architecture of the tourism model. The United States is number 4 on this list rather than number 1 because scale and dependency are different from the kind of sustained, multidimensional relationship that the entries above it represent. The tourism relationship with the United States is substantial and commercially essential. It is also predominantly transactional, driven by geography, price, and airlift availability as much as by cultural affinity. Number 3. Jamaica's cultural standing in the world. At this point in the analysis, it is necessary to address something the arrival statistics alone do not explain. The visitor numbers from each country on this list are generated by demand. Understanding the source of that demand requires looking at what Jamaica represents as a cultural entity, not what it offers as a destination. By any measure of per capita cultural influence, Jamaica's output over the past century is exceptional. The ratio of global cultural impact to population size is without a clear parallel among small island states. Reggae music, which emerged in Jamaica in the late 1960s, was inscribed by UNESCO on the representative list of the Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity in 2018. That designation recognizes the music not as a commercial product or a tourism asset, but as a form of human expression significant enough to be considered part of the world's shared heritage. The genre had, by the time of that inscription, been performing that function for decades, its themes of social justice, resistance, and human dignity having found audiences across countries and contexts that bore no direct relationship to Jamaica or the Caribbean. Bob Marley's album Legend remains the best-selling reggae album in history, with over 30 million copies sold. His album Exodus, released in 1977, remained on the United Kingdom's music charts for 56 consecutive weeks and was later designated the album of the 20th century by Time magazine. His song One Love was voted the best song of the 20th century. These are not industry accolades determined by a narrow panel. They are the aggregate judgment of music consumers across multiple countries and generations, and they remain in effect more than 4 decades after Marley's death in 1981. The cultural reach of Jamaica's athletic output is equally significant. Usain Bolt holds the world records for the 100 meters, 9.58 seconds, and the 200 meters, 19.19 seconds, both established in 2009. The Jamaican bobsled team's participation in the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary generated international media coverage that introduced Jamaica to audiences with no prior knowledge of the island and prompted a feature film, Cool Runnings, that circulated Jamaica's national identity into mainstream entertainment in multiple countries. Jamaica became the first Caribbean nation to qualify for the FIFA World Cup, doing so for the 1998 tournament in France. The relationship between Jamaica and the international spy fiction franchise rooted in Ian Fleming's James Bond novels is a further point of cultural embedding. Fleming wrote all 14 of his James Bond novels at his Jamaican estate, which he named GoldenEye. The association between Jamaica and the fictional world of those novels, distributed across film, literature, and television to global audiences over several decades, placed the island's name within a cultural reference framework that has nothing to do with Caribbean tourism marketing. The connection between Jamaica and hip-hop music is less frequently acknowledged in formal tourism contexts, but is structurally important. DJ Kool Herc, a Bronx-based DJ widely credited as one of the founding figures of hip-hop as a genre, was born in Kingston, Jamaica. The sound system culture that he carried to the South Bronx in the early 1970s. The technique of using two turntables to extend a percussion break and hold a crowd in rhythmic suspension originated in Jamaica. That technical and cultural inheritance has propagated through hip-hop into popular music globally. In 2024, TripAdvisor ranked Jamaica as the 11th best culinary destination in the world, the 13th best honeymoon destination, and the 24th best cultural destination globally. These are not regional rankings within the Caribbean. They are global rankings in which Jamaica competes against countries with substantially larger tourism budgets, longer histories of international visitor infrastructure, and greater territorial scale. In 2024, cultural heritage was cited as a leading motivation for visiting the island among arriving tourists. The Bob Marley Museum at 56 Hope Road in Kingston, Marley's former home and recording studio from 1975 until his death, is documented as one of the most frequently visited cultural landmarks in Jamaica, attracting visitors from across the world who travel specifically to the island because of his legacy. Number 3 is not a country, it is the accumulated cultural weight that Jamaica carries in the world, the foundation on which every arrival statistic in this analysis rests. Number 2, the United States of America, the full account. The United States appeared at number 4 in the earlier section of this analysis, where the focus was on scale and the structural dependency it creates. It returns at number 2 because a complete account of the American relationship with Jamaica requires addressing what that scale actually produces in commercial and economic terms. The commercial relationship between the United States and Jamaica is the most productive bilateral tourism relationship Jamaica maintains with any country. The consistency of American arrivals over time, the breadth of their geographic distribution within the United States, and the depth of the investment that American-linked companies are making in Jamaica's tourism infrastructure collectively produce a relationship that exceeds what any other country currently delivers to Jamaica's tourism economy. The 12.9% increase in airline seats serving Jamaica in the first months of 2025, compared to the same period the previous year, was driven primarily by American route expansion. American Airlines carry the majority of Jamaica's air visitors. The hotel and resort developments that are expanding Jamaica's accommodation capacity, Princess Grand Jamaica, the Riupu Palace Aquarelle, the Unico Hotel in Montego Bay, the nearly $400 million Pinnacle residential resort development, are facilities being built on the expectation that American demand will fill them. Average daily expenditure per stopover visitor to Jamaica in 2024 was approximately $167. American visitors, who predominantly book all-inclusive packages that price above that daily average, account for a disproportionate share of the $4.3 billion in total visitor expenditure that Jamaica recorded in 2024. The dispersal of the American Jamaican community, 1.124 million people by American Community Survey estimates, concentrated in New York and Florida, but with growing communities in Atlanta, Houston, and other major cities, continues to extend Jamaica's market reach into the American interior in ways that formal marketing campaigns would not accomplish independently. The 23.3% increase in Midwest arrivals in 2023 reflects that network effect operating in markets where Jamaica's direct diaspora presence is smaller than on the coasts. The 5x5x5 strategy targets 5 million visitors and $5 billion by the end of 2025. The strategy's viability depends on the American market continuing to perform. There is no scenario in which Jamaica reaches those targets if American arrivals plateau or decline. That dependency is both the source of the relationship's commercial value and the reason it warrants close attention from anyone assessing Jamaica's economic stability. The United States sits at number 2 on this list. It is not number 1 because the relationship above it is defined by something the American relationship, for all its scale and commercial depth, does not carry a historical and cultural entanglement that predates modern tourism entirely, and that continues to shape the relationship in ways that go well beyond the economics of arrivals and expenditure. Number 1. The United Kingdom. The United Kingdom sends fewer visitors to Jamaica annually than the United States does. It sends fewer than the United States by a very large margin. In 2024, American arrivals to Jamaica numbered in the millions. British arrivals numbered 230,000. On the basis of volume alone, the United Kingdom would not be in contention for the top position on this list. The case for the United Kingdom at number 1 is not a volume argument. It is an argument about the depth, the duration, and the structural complexity of the relationship between the two countries. A relationship that predates Jamaica's independence, that shaped the demographic composition of one of Britain's most significant cities, and that continues to express itself through tourism, remittances, cultural production, and the movement of people in both directions. On the tourism metrics first, Jamaica is the number 1 Caribbean destination for British tourists. Not one of the leading destinations, not a strong performer in the UK market, but the Pacific Caribbean island that British travelers choose above all others when they travel to the region. In the first half of 2024, UK arrivals to Jamaica increased by 14% compared to the same period in 2023. By the end of the third quarter, Jamaica had received 176,370 arrivals from the United Kingdom, up 8% from the 156,840 recorded in the corresponding period of 2023. For the full year 2024, Jamaica received 230,000 British visitors. The Jamaica Tourist Board had set a target of 250,000 visitors from the United Kingdom and Ireland by 2025, following a record 2022 year in which 229,000 UK visitors arrived. At the World Travel Market in London in November 2024, Minister of Tourism Edmund Bartlett confirmed Virgin Atlantic's planned non-stop service between London Heathrow and Sangster International Airport in Montego Bay, commencing in summer 2025. The Jamaica Tourist Board characterized that route as significant to its continued growth strategy for the UK market. The JTB operates a full regional office in London, one of only 4 such offices globally, alongside Miami, Toronto, and the domestic offices in Kingston and Montego Bay. Elizabeth Fox, the JTB's regional director for UK and Nordics, has confirmed Jamaica's position as the Caribbean's top market for UK travelers on multiple occasions through the annual World Travel Market engagement. The institutional infrastructure that Jamaica has built around the UK market reflects its sustained commercial importance. In 2025, following a 6% decline in UK arrivals attributed to a 20% reduction in TU flight capacity and the cessation of Marella Cruise Line's Montego Bay homeporting, Jamaica's tourism authorities adjusted their strategy and announced that TUI would operate additional flights from London Gatwick and Manchester to Montego Bay beginning in the 2026 summer season. The target that the JTB has now publicly stated is 500,000 UK visitors by 2030. Those are the tourism figures. They establish the UK as Jamaica's most significant source market outside North America. They do not establish it as number 1 on their own. What establishes the United Kingdom at number 1 is the following. The United Kingdom has the largest Jamaican diaspora community outside of Jamaica anywhere in the world. Estimates place the Jamaican heritage population of the United Kingdom at approximately 800,000 people. 4% of all Londoners are of wholly or partly Jamaican heritage. 3.5% of Birmingham's population. Significant Jamaican communities exist in Bristol's St. Paul's district, in Liverpool's Toxteth, in Sheffield's Burngreave, in Chapeltown in Leeds, in Moss Side and Longsight in Manchester, in Handsworth and Lozells in Birmingham, in Tottenham, Hackney and Harlesden in London, in Croydon and Lewisham in South London. These are not immigrant enclaves in the conventional sense of the term. Many of the Jamaican British communities in these areas are now in their 3rd and 4th generation of British residents. Their members hold British passports, attended British schools, work in British institutions, and participate in British civic life. They also maintain cultural connections to Jamaica through food, through music, through family relationships, through language that persist across generations. The historical origin of those communities is rooted in British colonial administration of Jamaica. Jamaica came under British rule in 1655. It remained under British governance for 307 years, until independence in 1962. During that period, the labor, the agricultural production, and the resources of Jamaica were directed toward the benefit of the British colonial economy. The wealth generated by Jamaican sugar production during the 18th century, produced through the forced labor of enslaved people, contributed to the capital formation that funded British industrial development. The Windrush generation represents the most documented chapter in the history of Jamaican migration to Britain. From 1948, when the HMT Empire Windrush arrived carrying Caribbean passengers, many of them Jamaican, who had been invited to contribute to Britain's post-war economic reconstruction. Through the 1950s and 1960s, over 200,000 Jamaicans settled in the United Kingdom. They came as British subjects holding British citizenship under the British Nationality Act of 1948. They were recruited specifically to fill labor shortages in the National Health Service, in Transport for London, in British Rail, and in factories across the English Midlands. Their descendants constitute the core of the Jamaican British communities that now exist across the country. The Windrush scandal of 2018, in which the British government wrongfully detained, denied services to, and in a number of cases deported people who had lived lawfully in the United Kingdom for decades, primarily targeting members of the Windrush generation and their children, represented a formal and publicly acknowledged failure of the state toward a community whose legal right to remain in Britain had never been in question. That history is part of the relationship between Jamaica and the United Kingdom. It is not separable from it. The tourists who travel between the two countries move within a bilateral context shaped by that history, whether or not it is explicitly acknowledged. The Notting Hill Carnival, held annually in London on the August bank holiday weekend, draws over 1 million attendees in a single day and is the largest street celebration in Europe and the second largest in the world after the Rio Carnival. Its cultural origins are Caribbean, rooted primarily in Trinidadian carnival tradition but deeply intertwined with the Jamaican sound system culture that has been practiced in West London since the 1960s. The event represents the most visible public expression of the Caribbean diaspora's presence in British cultural life. The music dimension of the UK-Jamaica relationship requires separate consideration. The reggae music industry's international reach was established in significant part through British institutional and commercial infrastructure. Island Records, the label that signed Bob Marley and the Wailers in 1972, was founded by Chris Blackwell, a white Jamaican entrepreneur operating from London. The label's decision to market Marley's music through the same channels used for British rock acts, rather than through the specialist routes and world music distribution networks, was what gave reggae its access to mainstream international audiences. The live performance of No Woman No Cry that became a major international hit was recorded at the Lyceum Theatre in London in 1975. The Exodus album, recorded in part while Marley was resident in London following the 1976 assassination attempt on his life in Kingston, remained on the UK music charts for 56 consecutive weeks. Time magazine later designated it the album of the 20th century. The album is, in a precise sense, a product of both Jamaica and London simultaneously. The cultural relationship between Britain and Jamaica extends through multiple generations of music production. British audiences sustained engagement with Jamaican music, from ska and rocksteady in the 1960s, through roots reggae in the 1970s, through dancehall in the 1980s and 90s, through contemporary Afrobeats adjacent genres in which Jamaican British artists are prominent, represents a depth of cultural connection that is not paralleled by any other non-Caribbean countries. Relationship with Jamaican music. The United Kingdom does not send the most visitors to Jamaica. It does not generate the most tourism expenditure. But no other country has a relationship with Jamaica that is simultaneously this historically grounded, this demographically embedded, this culturally entangled, and this institutionally maintained. The diaspora connection, the colonial history, the Windrush legacy, the music industry relationship, and the sustained commercial tourism partnership together constitute a relationship of a different order than what any other country on this list has built. with Jamaica. That is the basis for the United Kingdom's position at number 1. The aggregate picture. Across the 10 entries on this list, Latin America and the Caribbean, India, the Caribbean neighbors, Germany and continental Europe, the Jamaican diaspora as a unified economic force, Canada, the United States, Jamaica's global cultural standing, and the United Kingdom, a consistent pattern is visible. Jamaica's $4.3 billion tourism economy in 2024, and the 4.3 million visitors who generated it, rests on a base that is narrower than the headline figures suggest. The United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom together account for approximately 94% of all stopover arrivals. Remove those 3 countries and the entire tourism model is no longer viable in its current form. The remittance corridor reinforces that concentration. $3.6 billion in remittances reached Jamaica in 2024, nearly equivalent in scale to the total tourism expenditure figure. 90% of those remittances originated from the same 3 countries that dominate the tourist arrival data: the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. The Bank of Jamaica confirmed that in 2025, inflows reached $3.49 billion, the highest annual figure since 2021, maintained even through the economic disruption caused by Hurricane Melissa. The Bank of Jamaica's surveys indicate that approximately 85% of remittances are directed toward basic household expenses: utilities, food, housing, healthcare. This is not surplus capital being deployed toward investment or savings. It is income-sustaining daily consumption for a significant portion of Jamaican households. Its role in the functioning of Jamaica's economy is not supplementary, it is structural. Jamaica holds the following positions as of the 2024 reporting period. Second most visited destination in the Caribbean, after the Dominican Republic. World's leading cruise destination, named by the World Travel Awards for the 5th consecutive year. World's leading family destination, 5th consecutive year. Caribbean's leading tourist board, 17th consecutive year. TripAdvisor placed Jamaica 11th globally for culinary tourism, 13th for honeymoon travel, and 24th for cultural tourism in 2025. These are global rankings in competitive categories, achieved by an island of approximately 2.8 million residents, with a tourism budget that does not approach the scale of the countries it is ranking alongside. The JTB's 5x5x5 growth strategy, 5 million visitors and $5 billion in annual earnings by the end of 2025, was, by the JTB's own public statements, on track as of early 2025. Before Hurricane Melissa's effects were incorporated into the annual figures. What the data does not address, and what no tourism report addresses directly, is the structural question implied by the concentration figures. An economy in which 94% of its primary industry's customers come from 3 countries, and in which a separate revenue stream of equivalent magnitude also originates almost entirely from the same 3 countries, carries a degree of concentration risk that the headline growth figures do not neutralize. When one of those 3 countries experiences economic contraction, when airline routes are reduced, when natural disasters disrupt travel seasons,